Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. Oh my gosh, guys, so pumped, so grateful to be back with you. It's been an amazing month, so much going on. I just got back into the country from Costa Rica, where it is all about the pura vida, the pure life. It was amazing. Got to hang there with some amazing people, part of a special group of platinum partners with the Tony Robbins community, and then I had my wife and son join me. It was pretty awesome. Got to be with them for an additional week, just enjoying the pure life, as they say it, the pura vida, which is all around, and it's evident there in Costa Rica, it's evident in Hawaii, so many places around the world, and so many that I still want to see and visit and just appreciate, because this is a beautiful world. And that vitamin that I get out there when I'm out and about, good old vitamin N for nature, is just one of my favorites, always has been. So, and even with that, I was trying to record this podcast for you from my favorite place, from the beach. And it's a little bit of a stormy day today, and there's a little bit too much wind, and it would have been really hard to hear me because it was too much white noise. I thought you guys would appreciate the amazing, vibe in the background and the wind and waves crashing on the soundtrack. But my son was very appropriate when he said, "Dad, I think it's just going to be too loud, and your listeners maybe won't dig all that white noise." And I think he was right. So we'll see if we can figure out how to do that at some point, maybe when there's no wind and I happen to be on the beach. I just wanted to share some of that beautiful vibe with you. In fact, I did a little post on Facebook today of my favorite place, and of course that is the beach, at the beach. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to the show. I wanted to do a shout out to Judy Bees, who just sent me a review a little while ago. It says, 5-star review, and I quote, "Dr. Hemingway's approach to health and wellness has checked off so many boxes that were long-term questions I've had about my own health, questions that were not answered by classic medicine. You provide such good information in a way I can understand. Thank you so much." 5 stars. Judy Bees, thank you so much for that. I just love reading each and every one of all you guys' reviews and comments. So if you haven't done so already, please go to Apple Podcasts, click on the button just beneath the 5 stars after clicking on the 5-star farthest to the right, and just type me a little review. Tell me what you're enjoying. Tell me what you're learning, who you're sharing it with, whatever. I just love to hear from you guys. It's so awesome. It really motivates me and encourages me and just makes this all so worthwhile, because it's for you guys that I do the show. I just really love sharing good quality information, and I want you guys to just know what I know and know what I'm learning, and the stuff that will move the needle in your life and your health, your wellness, all of that, from the emotional, the physical, the natural, all of the things, spiritual, all of the health that you want and desire to get you to your best you, your best self, your most vital and energetic, all of that, and even live a little longer with these health pearls, right? A lot of people talk about biohacking and how you can do this and that and improve this part of your metabolism or your immune system or longevity through this mechanism or that. And I'm not about hacking. I'm about natural healing and natural wellness and taking advantage of the things that, for the most part, have been with us for millennia that we've forgotten over the years, and getting back to our roots, to our, healthiest healthy through natural means. We're not talking about buying some weird this or that somebody stated on a longevity podcast that this one thing might make you live a little longer. We're about getting all the things that you need naturally and occasionally in supplements, because as we know, our soils are depleted, and unfortunately we just can't get everything we need anymore from the food we eat, though we're going to do our best to live naturally, eat clean, organic, healthy, non-GMO, grass-fed and finished, natural, wild-raised, plants and animals. That's what I'm all about. All of the things, all of the natural things. So anyway, if you haven't heard that spiel before, I just love to share it because we can live so well and healthfully in a natural way. And if we want to, we'll be surprised the weight that we're trying to lose, that stubborn 5, 10, 20 pounds that we've been just trying to get to leave our midline, It can happen through living naturally, living healthy, through eating in a way that our bodies were meant to eat. And I share all of that in my course, my wellness, natural weight loss course that's available now. And a lot of you guys have already taken advantage of that. I did a half price sale for my birthday. I'm thinking about offering you guys another sale coming up because I just want to get this out to more of you. And I've noticed that when I put it on sale, you guys buy it up because you want to get that at the best price you can. And I get that. There's so much value there. And so I'll keep you posted. I have some ideas of an upcoming sale and upcoming offerings that I want you guys to be a part of. If you haven't already subscribed to my free Facebook group, Modern Medicine Movement, Health and Wellness Facebook group, you might check me out there because I usually give you guys the first dibs on any new products or release of any new podcasts. I got some special group stuff coming up real soon that I want you guys to be the first to know about because it's a journey each and every day of our lives. It's part of the journey, and sometimes we need a little extra kick in the pants to keep us on track, to have those people that will encourage us, other people in the group that are sharing, that are also on this wellness journey. And soon I'll have my group up. I'll be doing some group coaching and teaching and strategizing and just useful things to help you get through that course in a way that'll help you to make those changes that will improve your life. Not just for, the typical 6, 12 months, or less that people do when they change a lifestyle or they go on a diet or something. I'm all about lifetime change, but through simple means. No calorie counting required. Amazing. You're going to lose weight without calorie counting. So check out my course. I'll put the link in the show notes. Join my Facebook group if you haven't already. Got lots of fun stuff coming in the pipeline here. And anyway, today's podcast is something I've just been thinking about for a long time, and it became super evident to me recently when I've been in Costa Rica and Florida. I've been in Florida as well. And in both of these locations in the middle of summer, as it is now, it's hot. And I sweat a lot in these locations, even more than I sweat in Hawaii, believe it or not. And because of that, I've really, really appreciated more than ever the importance of hydration. And not only hydration with good old H2O, but hydration with a little extra. With some of those minerals that we need, that make up our bodies, our cells, our most important structures, and give us that zest and the energy that we have. Did you guys know that we are actually alive with voltage and electricity? Like, we could literally power a light bulb with our bodies easily, and much more than that if we could access our true potential. But we give off electricity. We have electricity within our bodies. We can think, we can move our arms and legs, tell our nerves what to do, that transmission, through the synaptic cleft, which is that space between one neuron and another, as the impulse jumps between neuron to neuron, or as our heart beats throughout every second, every minute, every hour of the day, what makes us alive, that's done because of electrical impulses. Electricity, the movement of electrons, like who knew? And that's only possible through having these charged cells. Did you know that we as humans have in all of our cells essentially a charge that helps us to be able to stay energetic and zestful, and what keeps us appropriately charged is something so simple, yet so important. And one of the things, there's a lot of different pumps and vehicles and pores and channels that exist. You guys have heard of sodium channels, potassium channels, calcium channels. And then there's this thing called the sodium potassium pump, right? That enables our cellular concentration to be largely favored towards the electrolyte potassium, whereas outside the cell, it largely favors sodium. So when we sweat, most people don't know this, but when we sweat, we lose a lot of that. It's both extra and intracellular fluid, but we lose a lot of it from the extracellular space, and that's heavy on the sodium. So our sweat typically is more sodium than potassium, but we will also lose potassium and some of these other important minerals as well. We can lose magnesium, we can lose calcium, and all these are super important for the appropriate function of our cells. And if we just hydrate always with good old-fashioned H2O, that's a great start. But we may be lacking a little bit, especially if you're in a place like I am currently, Florida or Costa Rica, where it's super hot and it's super humid. Like, I thought HYDRATE was humid. Well, Florida is much more humid. Shout out for all you folks who are out in Florida. Our friends Kimberly Hallinan and her family were just here, and we celebrated a beautiful afternoon on the beach together, and it's hot here and it's humid, and so you lose a lot of fluids. And with those fluids, you lose some electrolytes as well, namely those super common and important ones, which are sodium and potassium and magnesium and calcium. They can be lost as well, and it's important to replenish those. And we'll talk all about that. And, just getting down to it, just talking about hydration and water, it's just one of those things I love to talk about for two reasons. One, because it is so much bang for your proverbial buck, so to speak. Like simple things like proper hydration, proper maintenance of your fluids through drinking water, as well as water with electrolytes, and making sure you have those minerals that you need will get you that extra zest and energy that you require. Like for me, once I replaced and started to supplement with magnesium, for example, it was a game changer for me because I was low on my magnesium, and that contributed to so many of the problems that I was having. Everything from frequent headaches to just being kind of zapped of energy to not being in the best mood that I was hoping to be in. And magnesium kind of made all of that so much better. And I did a whole podcast on magnesium, so I'm not going to belabor it right now, but check out that podcast, The Magnificent Mineral Magnesium, which is so important, and most of us are deficient. More than half, almost 70% of us in the developed world, if not more, are deficient in magnesium. So check out that podcast. And what's super interesting is when we think about water and the trace elements and minerals that are in there, as long as we haven't ultra purified it and haven't added anything back into it, we're going to get some of these trace elements. But unfortunately, most of us didn't know this. In fact, I didn't way back when I got my first reverse osmosis filter. Like, that thing basically clears out everything out of your water, even the good stuff that you want. Like, it's great that it clears the chlorine out, but it's also taking out those trace elements and minerals that you actually want to have in your water. Like that natural so-called spring water that has things like some sodium and some potassium, some magnesium, some calcium. Those things are actually removed through reverse osmosis. So if you have a reverse osmosis filter and you're not adding back in any of these minerals in one way or another, you're missing out. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And it all comes back to our life and our ancestry, which really, way back when, millions of years ago, all started in the sea, right? No matter what your beliefs are on creation, evolution, how this all came to be, I think we can all agree that life started long, long, long ago in the sea. And, the sea and the land were divided. however that may have happened, and we had creatures in the sea, which, the famous one I learned about in school is this one called the coelacanth, which was like this 6-foot long sort of dinosauric fish that at some point came up on land and developed the ability, to walk, and its ancestry through the vertebrate kingdom is super interesting. So shout out to the coelacanths out there, right? That fossil that was discovered way back, I think 1938 or something, super interesting. There's several additional ones that have been discovered since. And the way I just put it all into a big, conglomerate of information, because no matter what you believe with respect to how everything came to be, the plant and animal life, we as humans, all of it, I think we can agree on, comes through natural law and natural means. And I believe that we are natural beings, and we have this essence within us. And what's cool is that, this life in the sea, if you were to take seawater, ocean water, for example, which is one of my favorite things to spend time in, and you'll see nowadays there's a lot of data that looks at this, but you guys have heard of things like grounding, or earthing, these kinds of things where you're basically trying to get your body back to its appropriate charge. Like I said, we all have charged particles. All of our cells are charged. We have a slightly negative charge, and so does the earth. And so as we walk on the earth barefoot, is even better, of course, or if we're in the ocean, being exposed to the natural charge of the ocean and all the minerals there help us to be in the appropriately charged energetic state that we want to be in. And then if you add things in like magnets, which we won't have time to talk about today, you can even enhance that. And I like to go simply. I don't have any magnets under my bed. I know a lot of people that are into this biohacking have spent thousands of dollars adding in magnets and infrared lights, and I'm all about simplicity and doing things that are mostly free and pretty easy, right? Like you can get that same spectrum of light that's so beneficial that you hear people buying all these gadgets, from all these different companies that have sort of taken advantage of this, new scientific evidence that these infrared wavelengths of light are helpful and beneficial. You can get all that from the sun, like good old vitamin D, and then in the first couple hours of the morning, the last couple hours of the evening, like if you get that infrared spectrum light into your body, it will help you regenerate your best potential. Electrically, this thing called structured water, which we don't really have time to get into, and there's still lots of discoveries coming in on that every day. All of that can happen naturally. You don't have to buy any fancy water that tells you it's quote unquote structured water or some fancy equipment to make it. Who knows if you even had the ability to get it and you drink it, the likelihood that it's staying in that form through your digestive process is not that high anyway. So don't spend tons of money on all these weird gadgets that are out there, but do the things that are natural. Do the things that are healthful, like being out in nature. Good old vitamin N. If you can, be out in the ocean. You'll get utility from that. Try to get exposed to the natural sunlight in the early morning, sunrise hours +2, sunset -2, those couple hours after the sunrise and before the sunset, 2 to 3 hours. Those have the best amount of these infrared spectrum light wavelengths that you'll be exposed to without getting, sunburned. It's, fine to get some vitamin D midday. Like I try to get maybe 20 minutes every day, midday or so I can get that vitamin D, but don't overdo it, because if you're, howly like me or fair skinned, you'll get a sunburn, which you're not trying to do. But anyway, natural mechanisms, ocean water. My digression here was talking about ocean water, which has all of these important minerals in it. Ocean water is alive. All of you that spend time in the ocean, you know that there's an energy there. And what's interesting, I even did a little research looking at the key minerals in ocean water, and literally 5 out of 6 of the top, by weight and by, prominence in ocean water, 5 out of 6 top minerals we need for everyday cellular function. I'm just going to go to my research here and make sure I get that exactly right. I wanted to read it to you. The minerals in parts per million in seawater, of course, number one would be salt, right? Sodium chloride, like duh, you taste ocean water, it's pretty dang salty, or you can kind of feel it on your skin afterwards, So it's not surprising that number 1 and 2 are chloride and sodium. Chloride by weight is heavier than sodium, so chloride would be number 1. And then number 2 would be sodium. We need that. It's in all of our cells, and especially outside our cells in the extracellular space. Right after that, guess what? Parts per million, the most common in the sea, in the ocean, is actually, my favorite, none other but magnesium. Magnesium is there, followed by sulfur, calcium, and potassium. So right there, 5 out of 6 of those top, elements are in our bodies in significant concentrations and necessary, and they all can be lost through all those fun activities we like to do, especially me out in Florida and Costa Rica. It's been weird. I'll be surfing and I'll literally be sweating as I'm surfing. I've never had that happen to me in Hawaii. I think our ocean water is just not quite warm enough. It's in the 70s there, like hottest day of the year, maybe 79. Maybe it hits 80 once a year. Florida, Costa Rica, it's like mid 80s, the ocean water. So you literally can be sweating while you're surfing. It's a crazy thing. Like I said, recently this has just been on my mind because it's been so easy to get dehydrated in these warmer, more humid climates than even I'm used to, spending the last 30 years primarily in Hawaii. And in Hawaii, there's certainly chances to get dehydrated, but even more pronounced if you're, in the Gulf Coast or you're in warm regions. Any place, in the summer, especially in the U.S., can get really hot. My friends in Utah tell me they've been having heat waves, 100 plus, like, holy moly. Like, I didn't know it got that hot there. But anyway, dehydration is real. And, let's talk about that a little bit, because it's something that's so common, and yet many of us aren't thinking about it as much as we should. And I know I did a whole podcast on hydration not long ago because I just feel like it's so important. We know that, if we want to maximize our physical performance, our energy, our ability to just get crap done, both, in the office, so to speak, outside, in our whatever our movement is, our 6 activities we like to do. For me, it's surfing, or it's hiking, or running, or mountain biking, or skateboarding, or whatever it is. Like, we gotta have peak performance, and hydration is an important and really an essential part of that. Because if we get dehydrated, as small as like 1% to 2% dehydrated, it'll significantly impact our exercise performance. And did you know that athletes that are exercising or competing or doing things for 1 or 2 hours athletically, you can literally be getting as much as 6 to 10% of your water in your body lost during that time. And they've studied this articulately in detailed fashion, where you do a pre and post weight to see how much you lose in sweat, basically, because we know that, basically 1 kilogram of weight, or 2.2 pounds, that is lost during exercise, that's basically all water. That's dehydration. And you can lose 1 to 2% of that during a hard workout that's an hour long, and maybe even as much as 6 to 10% if you're really crushing it in a humid place. Like, that's a lot of dehydration. And when you get dehydrated, not only does it decrease your exercise performance, but it enhances the bad stuff, like the stress, the oxidative stress on your body. So you want to be able to stay hydrated to reduce that oxidative stress. You want to be clear in your focus mentally, and that can wane when you're dehydrated. Did you know that your brain is strongly responsive to your hydration status? I mean, if you guys have ever, been in an event that was all day and the speaker keeps reminding you, hey, drink some water. My favorite is I've been to a couple of Tony Robbins events, and he literally, that guy will go all day. But he's always asking you to hydrate, because it's so important. If you want to be in peak state, that state where you're creative, where you're learning and you're growing, you have to be appropriately hydrated, because your brain actually responds to that. It responds to that, which is super interesting. And so one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that to be not only at our peak performance with respect to, our brain, our bodies, we really want to keep in mind that to stay in this peak state, we need to be hydrated. We need to be hydrated. It's so important to stay hydrated. So we're going to talk about how we can best do that, because the amount of water that we lose is way more than you would think. And if you want to even measure it in yourself, I really want to get my wife to do this, because she's been exercising lately like midday, here in Florida, and it's so stinking hot. And yeah, big surprise, she'll be out for an hour or more walking, running, what have you, and she'll be drenched in sweat. And I about would guarantee that she's losing several pounds of water weight and probably not drinking it all back, because it's pretty hard to drink that much water. I mean, have you guys had several liters of water at a time to replace that? Like, that's a lot of water. And I would humbly submit that there are even better ways to hydrate, even better than just with water alone. If you add in a couple of those important electrolytes that we'll talk about, like the ones I mentioned that are from our water of life, right? The seawater: sodium, potassium, magnesium was number 3. Holy crap, magnesium, calcium. These are super important. We'll talk about how we can add those back in, because we will perform even better if we hydrate with some of those additional minerals. In fact, there's a study I wanted to share with you. It's pretty interesting. Let's see if I can pull it up here, which looked exactly at that. It looked at the benefits of replacing your electrolytes and such. It's called Efficacy of Ingesting an Oral Rehydration Solution After Exercise on Fluid Balance and Endurance Performance. This was reported in the Journal of Nutrients, December 2020. So not even a year old, guys. It was super interesting, because they took 3 common things. One was, just plain water. 2 was a kind of a special drink, not even that special, but it had a couple of the electrolytes in it. And the third one was like a sports drink. So they had 3 different groups of people, and they found that, guess what was best? Sorry, you commercial sports drink guys, Gatorade, Powerade, whatever it was. They didn't say the name of what they used, but that was not the best. The one where they basically added some of these basic minerals to their oral rehydration drink, which they created themselves, which actually, you can read the paper, it wasn't really that hard to do. It basically salt, water, sodium chloride, and then water, and then a small amount of, tiny amount of sugar. They created their own rehydration drink, and basically it excelled. It was the best at rehydrating. So this was done, like I said, in the journal entitled Nutrients, December of 2020. And the reason I even mention this is because, although water is awesome and it's a great start, especially when you're sweating a lot, it's important to put back in some of those minerals that we lose. Things like sodium, things like potassium, magnesium, calcium. These things are actually important to put back into our bodies as well. So I wanted to share that study with you. And it's really interesting. They have a lot of graphs. I'm just kind of paging through it here that show that the ability to enhance the plasma volume was better with the group that had the oral rehydration. It was the best, and then the sports drink was a little bit better than water to rehydrate. But all of them did a pretty good job, way better than would have been the case if they hadn't rehydrated at all. And you may think of hydrating yourself before, during, or after. What's the best time? Guess what? All of the above. And in fact, a lot of us don't think about this so much, but hydrating before a big event is super important as well, to be able to be in that peak performance state. Then hydrating to some degree during the event, and of course hydrating after the event. All of these are super important, which is why long distance runners, those that have ever competed in a marathon. Obviously during the race you're drinking some fluids. They got the water stands all during the race and things like that, because you don't want to get behind the 8 ball. You want to stay hydrated and start hydrated if you can, because then you'll get the best out of your performance, your muscular performance, your physical performance. Also, we talk about your brain performance. You need to be hydrated for that. So it's super, super, super important before, during, and after. So electrolytes, just going back to this important topic, because we're now kind of making a segue into learning about how do we put them back into our bodies, how do we hydrate and add in these electrolytes. Electrolytes are so important because they are literally the makeup of all of our body fluid. Like I mentioned at the outset, inside the cell, we primarily have a preponderance of potassium. Outside the cell, more so sodium. There's this thing called the sodium-potassium pump. And what it does is it pumps sodium out of the cell while potassium goes into the cell. And it requires energy because they're going against their normal gradient, right? The normal flow, if you just open the floodgates, is going to go from a high concentration to a low concentration, which would mean the potassium would just leak out of the cell and the sodium would come into the cell. And you do have times where that occurs, like when you transmit a nerve impulse, right? The sodium channels open up, sodium rushes in, the potential changes, you can conduct that nerve impulse, and then to get it back to the starting point where you have that slightly negative electrical charge, you have to turn on that sodium-potassium pump, which puts the sodium back outside the cell into the extracellular fluid and puts the potassium back into the cell, because that's what keeps the charge right where it needs to be at that minus 0.1 millivolt level that is so essential for life, because we are naturally charged. We have that charge, that electrical impulse, which we use every moment of every day, whether it's for the beating of our heart, for the conduction of all the nerve impulses, for the ability of our brain to function. It's all electrical. We are electrical bodies. It's amazing. I could talk about that for an hour because it's such a fascinating thing. There's even this relatively new discovery about the electrical, not only the electrical nature of your heart. We all kind of know about that, right? You have this thing called the SA node, which is in the right atrium. It generates the electric impulses, which travel through the heart down into the AV node, the ventricles, and then spreads throughout the ventricle fibers, the Purkinje, the His-Purkinje system, which basically makes the heart beat, right? We know all of that, but we also have in the heart some sensory cells, and this isn't often talked about. There's this whole system of sensory cells in the heart that have their own kind of native intelligence, if you will. And that's this fascinating thing. It's all electrical, just like the rest of our bodies are electrical, our neurons, etc. And that's why when we feel things deep within our heart, so to speak, there is sort of a heart and brain, both they're separate, but they're also connected. There's a whole sort of nervous system connecting our heart and brain. And this is another fascinating topic we'll talk about maybe on some other show, but it's all electrical. It comes down to that charge that we have, which is slightly negative, and it's important because we need to maintain that charge. And one of the ways that we can do that is by rehydrating ourselves with some of these minerals that we lose, namely the sodium, which a lot of it is lost. If you look at your sweat, it's different based on every individual, is slightly different, but you can actually measure this, not only the quantity, which is easy, you just get on a scale before and after and you can see how much water you've lost, but also the amount of salt that you lose, both sodium, potassium, chloride, etc., because you could actually measure. There's this special sort of salt test that you can measure that. And it's interesting to know, some people lose more salt than others. I tend to lose a fair amount and I sweat a lot. As my wife, Brooke, sweats a lot. We tend to be sweaters, and it feels good, right? We like to sweat. It's kind of a cleansing, but we can lose some of those important electrolytes because they are so important in maintaining everything in our bodies, from the electrical potential to, of course, our fluid balance. It's all governed by these electrolytes. Also, we talked a little bit about the neurons and the conduction of impulses for that, but also the contraction of our muscles. That's super important because that's all done through proper hydration, okay? Muscles contract because of proper hydration and from these electrolytes that are rushing into the cell or being moved out of the cell, or the pump that I've described a couple of times called the sodium-potassium pump. That's so important. And so we need appropriate levels of sodium, right? Of chloride, of potassium, of magnesium, of calcium. These are probably the most important ones. And then there's others that we need in smaller amounts, zinc and so on, but selenium, all those things. But these are the essentials. I'm going to say them again because they are so essential. It's sodium, right? The sodium chloride, which is the salt, sodium, potassium. We need to have the magnesium for all of those reasons. It's a cofactor in something like 600 or more reactions. It's literally used in so many processes in our body. And without magnesium, we are hopeless, right? It's the magnificent mineral for a reason. It's so important to have in our bodies. And so magnesium, sodium, potassium, calcium, these are kind of the ones, like if you think about, as a physician, these are on my mind all the time because somebody comes in, let's say to the ER or urgent care, they're sick. One of the first things you think they're pretty dehydrated. One of the first things we quickly check is a quick blood test that tells the amounts of these electrolytes, the sodium, the potassium, the chloride, the calcium, magnesium. These are done almost immediately upon arrival because that gauges our treatment, right? We often hydrate. In fact, almost always we hydrate with some of these important electrolytes. We rarely would give somebody plain water as hydration, almost never. We always put other things in it like sodium, chloride, often potassium, often magnesium. We will replace those right into the main vein, so to speak, when you get really dehydrated or have electrolyte issues from severe dehydration and all other causes. We replace those right into the blood. And the cool thing is we can replace those orally as well. And I would be the first to admit that even as a physician, though I have the ability to give you all these things right in an IV, like the best way is just drink it. The so-called oral rehydration therapy. You can go to the WHO's website and they'll talk about that ad nauseum, the ORT, the oral rehydration therapy. And I would always start there. So we'll talk about how to best do that, and it's going to contain these important electrolytes, these important minerals. It's going to contain sodium, right? It's going to contain potassium. It's going to contain magnesium and calcium. Hopefully it'll have all those things and maybe a couple of others, but I would say, to start with those because those are the so essential electrolytes in your body, that everything you do, every moment of every day, whether it be conducting the nerve impulses, proper brain function, that electrical potential that we need, health starts with the simple things like hydration. Anyway, and a lot of us don't think about it because, like I said, we may be using some sort of reverse osmosis system, which is great at removing all the pollutants, because often if you just turn on the tap and you have unfiltered water, you can be getting a bunch of pollutants, and you can measure this. You can go to, there's a website for every county, in the U.S., for example, and hopefully a lot of other places in the world where you can see what's in your water. And then you can decide, if you need a filter, if so, what kind do you want to get, and then how do you add back in these important minerals like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, these sorts of things that you also really need, because every cell in your body needs not only the proper water or hydration, but needs these electrolytes or these minerals. And why do we call them electrolytes? Well, because when the minerals are in solution, you put sodium in water, or you put potassium in water, or you put chloride or magnesium, calcium, put them in water, they become ions, they become charged particles. So that's when we start calling them electrolytes. If they're just in their naked form, not in solution, then they would be more in the minerals. But once they're in solution in water, then we refer to them as electrolytes. And they truly do have an electrical charge. And I won't get into the weeds of that right now, but For all those science and physics buffs out there, you all understand the electrical charge. When you dissolve, say, sodium chloride, which is table salt, into water, it breaks into its constituent parts, the positive sodium and the negative chloride, and these ions remain in solution, and they're charged particles, literally. So anyway, we know that we are prone as humans to dehydration. We're just prone to it. And certain of our groups, say little kids, the elderly, we're even more prone to it than we might normally be, and it will be harder for us to access rehydration. Like your kids, unless you give them a water bottle that they can sip on all day long, which I would encourage you to do, like they literally have to ask you for water. I know my 3-year-old, if I haven't been proactive and put, she likes ice water, so I put it in her little princess, sippy cup, which she's super pumped on because it keeps the ice cold. And anyway, if I don't proactively, fill that up at the beginning of the day, like she has to come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, can you get me some water?" And I kind of feel bad. I'm like, oh crap, I should have been more proactive, because she notices when she gets dehydrated. And so for the kids, they're even more prone to this because they don't have as quick and easy of access to water like we do as adults, because we can just, be drinking, take our little glass with us all day long, and we can be drinking water, no problem. And one of the ways we can easily monitor our hydration is what we've talked about before in the hydration podcast, which is like, what color is our urine or our shishi or our output? What color is it? And if it's dark, it's not like almost the color that it went in as water, not pretty clear, then we're dehydrated. Like that's a pretty simple test. Anyway, most people don't know this, but when you're exercising like pretty heavily, and this is not even necessarily in a super humid environment, but you can easily lose 1 to 2 liters an hour of fluid, like easily. And 2 liters, guys, that's like 3/4 of a gallon. Like that's a lot. So that's the kind of water I lose when I'm exercising, and I'm usually in a warm place like Hawaii or Florida, or recently I was in Costa Rica, and I'm easily dumping 2 liters an hour. And so it's so important to replace that, and it'll stay in your body better and be more helpful and useful if you replace it with both water plus electrolytes. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can mix up your own solution. There's several websites which have a pretty good mix. I can put those in the show notes. You can also email me at modernmedicinemovementpodcast@gmail.com, and I can give you exactly what I use, because I drink plenty of normal natural water, but I also do add in electrolytes as well. I've noticed that that's been a game changer for me. And so if you want to know exactly what I do for my electrolytes, I can share that with you as well. Just go ahead and email me, modernmedicinemovementpodcast@gmail.com, and I can talk about that specifically and what I use. But there's a lot of products out there. There's a lot of ways to add back in some of these important minerals. And they're all going to be a little bit better than doing nothing at all. But some are going to be better than others, and some are going to be more affordable than others, and all these kinds of things. But I just want to encourage you to open your mind to the importance of not just proper hydration with the good old H2O, but also with these important minerals that come into the electrolyte form in our body, because we need them as well. Predominantly sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. I know I've said these things over and over, but those are the main ones that we really need, and they all come from Mother Earth, right? Those are the most prominent in seawater as well, which is where all life started, right? All life begins in the sea, and in our bodies, those are the ones that are most prominent, and we need them to maintain that electrical potential to conduct the nerve impulses for all these things. So most of us will lose more sodium than potassium typically, because it's coming out of that extracellular fluid, which is mostly sodium. And like I said earlier, potassium is more inside the cell, but it's important to replace it as well. And when you're out and about, you may not even know that you're losing, water or fluids, because a lot of it can be insensible. Like if you're in a place like Utah, which a lot of my friends are there, it's pretty dry there. And so just the amount of fluids that you use to moisten that dry air through your nose, your throat, your whole respiratory tree of your lungs, like that actually takes a lot of water. It's no wonder you get like a dry mouth. I know I do when I'm over there. I feel like I have to just pound the water because I'm losing so much, you know. There's a guy many of you may have heard of, really great guy by the name of Rob Wolf. He's, probably one of the original paleo guys, and he developed a hydration solution as well, which is great. He's got a website. He'll share how to do his. His is called, I'm not going to mention, I'm not promoting any particular thing on this podcast, but I just wanted to, put in your awareness the importance of rehydrating with these different electrolytes and minerals that our body needs. And his recommendation, just for the average healthy person, is about 4 grams of sodium a day, which is much higher than what the American Heart recommends, right? And the reason for that is too many of us just get too much sodium from processed foods. They estimate that 60 to 70% of the sodium that most of us, at least in the US, Canada, developed world, the sodium we get is mostly from processed foods, which is crap. Because we're getting all the other garbage in the processed food. We're getting highly refined carbohydrates. We're getting seed oils, of all kinds, soy oil, corn oil, canola, all these things, which are toxic to our bodies, and we're getting way too much salt. But those of us that are on the journey to eat naturally, clean, healthfully, we're actually not getting as much sodium as we need. So we typically, once you get into more of a natural diet, be it paleo, keto, vegan, whatever, and you're not eating, you start to kind of lose all the processed foods, which I would highly recommend because they're mostly junk and they're not good for you. But once you lose those processed foods, your sodium goes way down because most of your intake, if you're eating the SAD diet that I like to call it, the standard American SAD diet, most of the intake is from, you guessed it, those processed foods. Most of the sodium comes from that. So when you stop eating processed foods, your requirement for sodium actually goes up. So you'll have to even more, you'll be salting your food, and hopefully you can grab some awesome salt. I talked about all the different kinds of salts available: Celtic salt, Himalayan salt, the Redmond salt coming from Utah is also a great type of salt as well, the natural salts, because they do have trace minerals, but you're going to probably need double or triple what the AHA recommends because you're not going to be getting it from all the crap processed foods. So anyway, super important to have appropriate levels of salt and electrolytes in your diet because we absolutely need them for our cells to maintain that electrical gradient that we talked about, to be energetic, and to have that potential to live vital, right? We just got to have it. And I don't even have time to talk about all these other curious topics. Some of you may have heard about this so-called structured water that many people are talking about, the H3O2, that is a form of water in sort of this octagonal, form in our bodies. That within the cells, it's often in that geometric form, and it's a really important type of water which we can get. I would just propose we get it out of natural means, right? Like important, healthy, natural plants, right? Fruits and vegetables that are super water filled. Like, a watermelon is like 98 or 99% water, which is also like our human cells. And most people don't know this, but they're literally like around 98% water molecules. So, when you look in the textbook, how much water is in the human body, they're going to tell you, 60%, 70%, whatever. But if you actually did it by the molecules, how many molecules are in your body? Like most of your body's molecules are actually water. Like that's the main ingredient, be it H2O or, this new kind of fattish H3O2 or whatever. It's basically, we are like 98% water molecules. So if that doesn't give you a little bit of an indication of how important it is to stay hydrated, be hydrated, and rehydrate yourself, I don't know what will, because it's literally, we are made up of this 98, I think the actual number is something like 98.9% of us, of our molecules in our body is actually water molecules. So anyway, I think that's enough for today. I'm not going to get into any more weighty, kind of topics about this structured water thing or about the EMFs and about, what are all the things that we do that are not awesome for our water in our body, for our cells. But, we've talked about those before. Try to limit the cell phone stuff, hopefully 3 and 4G and not the 5G, which is going to be kind of disastrous, I think, to our bodies. And turning those phones off at night, clicking them on airplane mode, turning off our Wi-Fi router unless we really have to have it on. But at night, if we can kind of minimize that, especially so we can get good high quality sleep and to get those hours of sun that we know are so beneficial. If you can be outside in those first couple hours of the day, I love to be up and see the sunrise, and I love to see the sunset. And I've always loved it, and I think naturally we've always sort of loved that. We just didn't know of all the many benefits, and that can really help to create the most optimal environment in our bodies for ourselves and for the water that's in our bodies through being outside, being outdoors. And so all of the things, right? Walking outside barefoot, doing your earthing, grounding, and just getting that electrical charge back to where it should be. And you can do all this without putting magnets under your bed. If you want to put magnets under your bed, that's great, but I'm just going to walk around barefoot and get some sunlight because it's free and it's easy. And I don't have to worry about putting magnets under my bed or trying to travel with magnets or anything. So anyway, enough of that. Love you guys. Thankful for you. Please share the podcast if you found anything useful in hydration, in electrolytes, in rehydrating yourselves. Please feel free to share it. Check me out on Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. Send me an email, modernmedicinemovementpodcast@gmail.com. Join my free Facebook group, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast Health and Wellness Group. And reach out to me, give me a review, tell me what you're liking, and feel free to share. Until next time, a big aloha.